Today's webinar will focus on what cities look like if they were designed by women. Currently, globally, only 5% of city leadership positions and 10% of senior architect and urban planning positions are held by women. I want to repeat these numbers because they highlight the importance of this webinar. 5% of city leaders' positions are held by women, and 10% of senior architect and urban planning positions are held by women. The inadequacy of gender expertise in urban planning has meant that women's experience of accessing essential services and economic opportunities has too often been an afterthought in the design of urban environments. This gap has led to serious inconveniences and at times danger for women, children, and gender minorities. Yet this is changing, and this webinar is hosting 4 inspirational women that are actively making this change happen, to discuss how gender-inclusive urban planning and design can reshape gender roles and create safer, happier, and more equitable cities for all. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to our own C40 Director of Urban Planning and Design, Hélène Chartier. Hélène will lead the panel discussion and introduce you to the incredible lineup of speakers and personally a group of women that I very much look up to. So over to you, Hélène, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Viola. So just maybe before I introduce the panel, let me explain a little bit why urban planning and design is so important and why women is so important in these practices. So urban planning and design, it's really the backbone of cities development. It's really how we integrate the different sectors and aspects of city life, from housing policies to economic development. It determines the typology of the urban fabric, its form, its density, the building and the open space, and it defines the mix of uses and people that will compose the city. To face the climate crisis, it is really urgent to harness a model of low-carbon urban development that is also thriving and inclusive for all, so it can be widely replicated. To succeed, we must empower the next generation of female urban planners and designers, and we must highlight the key role of women in championing sustainable and inclusive planning and design. And that's exactly what we want to do in this panel today. The panel and the 3 great persons we have today are, so the panel will give the floor to 3 women who come from different backgrounds. They live in different parts of the world, but they have in common to be well-recognized leaders in a male-dominated built environment sector, and they are strong advocates for more gender-inclusive planning and design practices. So first, we have Emma Miloyo, who is practicing architect and partner at Design Source. She has a vast experience in the building industry in the East and Central Africa region. She was the first female president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, and she was recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 women in Kenya. Emma's long life ambition is to inspire young women and help them break the glass ceiling that has limited their success, especially in the male-dominated field like architecture. Then Emma will be joined by Marion Valeur, a dear friend of mine, who is advisor to the mayor of Paris, in charge of architecture, urban landscape, and green spaces. In her previous role, Marion helped deploy the Réinventer Paris competition, the international call for innovative urban projects that has been exported to other cities all across the world through C40. Marion teaches urban controversies and environmental philosophy at various Parisian universities. In 2021, she has received the European Talent Award for real estate professional age 40 or under by the famous Urban Land Institute. And finally, a warm welcome to Mira Sandarara Juan, who is presently working as the team lead for the Gender and Policy Lab within the Greater Chennai Corporation. She has spent She has spent the 3 last decades working as a social development professional in the area of gender and monitoring and evaluation. She's collaborating with government, civil society, and corporate sector in the issue of gender, livelihood, disaster management, and sustainability. So thank you all for joining this discussion today. And I would like to welcome the audience also to participate in the discussion. You can use the chat box function and you can submit your question through the Q&A box. Our panelists will answer your question at the end of the discussion. So let me start with a question for Emma. So Emma, from your experience as the first female president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, what barriers, what challenge do you think women experience in accessing the architectural profession or the other built environment field?
Thank you very much, Helen, and it's wonderful to be on this webinar discussing something that's very, very close to my heart, and wonderful to see about 221 people from all over the world discussing gender inclusive design. It's so wonderful, the statistics you've given, about 5% of city leaders, only 5% of city leaders being women, only 10% of architects and planners being women. And I think that is the first challenge that women have getting into a place, that they have no role models. They have, the mold that they grow up knowing and seeing is a male mold and does not in any way fit to who they are and how they express themselves. And that's the first barrier, that there are no role models. There are no women who have gone before them for them to emulate. And that was the first thing for me, that there were very, very few women. And it took men to actually hold my hand and say, come on and let's do this, So the gender conversation is not only a female conversation, it's a male and female conversation. Because when you're talking about 5%, of city leaders being women, you need the 95% of male leaders to pull up the women and open the door and hold the door open. So first, that's the biggest barrier, that there was no role modeling. So it's never a natural career choice, starting from, the adolescence years, where girls' minds, really, there's a big shift around age 12, age 13, in their self-esteem and who they can be, and the profiling around them and seeing who they can be starts at that age. So they have very few people getting into STEM courses, the science courses. They have fewer people getting into architecture and engineering. So that's the first place, that we must elevate more women into these leadership positions to show others that you are capable of it, because they are capable, but they just don't know they're able to. So that was my first barrier. Yeah, Helen, over to you.
Sorry, excuse me. So what measures have been taken since your leadership of the Architectural Association of Kenya to create these pathways for more women to join the design sector?
Yes, and it's very interesting. From two perspectives, there's what I consciously did to enable other women, but what happened almost naturally. So after I was just practical, statistics, after I was the first female president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, which is an organization about 50 years old, after me was another female president. So in a span of 50 years, we'd never had a female president, and then suddenly, because one person broke the glass ceiling, next was another female, and the leadership was 3/4, or let me say 65% women. So before I came, I used to be probably the one, in a 30 person council, but after my leadership, whether consciously or not consciously, after I left, the majority of leadership of the association was actually female, and they had been voted in. All these are democratic; they're not handed over. They had been voted in by men. So that was very, very. That's just a shift by nothing else, but by my being declared a president. Just by that fact, just opened women's eyes, and they stood up for these positions and they brought themselves forth, and they did a wonderful job at this. But also, I realized that we needed to also be conscious. So there's, what happens subconsciously when people see you, they see you in the news, they see us in a webinar like this, but there's also what you have to do consciously. And we realized as, a cohort of female leaders, whether in engineering, planning, architecture, and we said we came together and formed a coalition or an organization where we said we have to be very, very consciously getting more women into leadership, because once we get them into leadership, the rest is just, it flows very, very easily. So we formed an organization called Women in Real Estate, WIRE. It would have been Women in Built Environment, but that would have been WIBE instead of WIRE. We love the acronym WIRE. It just works very well. So we get women wired and connected. And it's been phenomenal when we pay it forward to others, when we hold the door open for others to come through, how they continuously pay it forward. So I don't even mentor young girls in high school. I mentor young professionals who mentor young graduates, who mentor young students at university, who have sort of different, everyone in that journey has a different challenge. And those young graduates go to high school and the high schoolers are speaking. So it's just a wonderful trickle down effect, but it starts from the top, just as the statistics presented themselves. It's something that we have to really fix at the top, and then it'll trickle down. So that's been my experience. And those are a few efforts, wonderful, work that we've been able to do in terms of advocacy. But the other thing is the numbers. Numbers are shocking. So sometimes people just assume, oh, we don't know, I think there are few women. But when you have 5%, 10%, so we consciously measured at every level how many female architects are there, leading firms, engineers, planners in their different, and that when you go with that to government, when you go with that to someone that you're looking at partnering with you to spread the message, and it's just fundamental. So data-driven advocacy has done wonders for us, and collecting the numbers really just shows the stark reality. And here on the designers side, it's that way, but the other side of the developers, the people who actually, the contractors and the developers, the numbers are even shockingly worse, because it's a very resource-driven, industry in that sense. So that's been the little that we've been able to do, and we've seen wonderful results in the last 5 years since, I've been president, and not only in the architectural space, across the sector, there's been a first female president in the last span of 5 years, incredibly, not by my own doing, but by virtue of just my position and me taking that on. So that's been my experience, and thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Very inspiring to see how you paved the way for other women in Kenya and elsewhere. Let me move on with Mira. Mira, could you tell us why the Chennai Gender Policy Lab started, and what issue are you trying to tackle with this organization, and how you are addressing them?
So good afternoon, and it's lovely to be part of this forum. So the Gender and Policy Lab, there's a history. Is there some issue with this?
Mira, we can't hear you anymore. Mira?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but have you opened twice, like with your phone and your computer?
Okay, 1 second. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the Gender and Policy Lab, I have to take you back 10 years from now. In 2012, there was a horrific incident of a rape that happened in the capital of India, in Delhi, where there was a young woman who was assaulted in a moving bus. So this just shook the country, that this kind of violence that happened to a young woman. And everyone, policymakers, governments, citizens felt that there had to be something done in terms of ensuring safety of women when they're out in public spaces. So they set up a fund for this. The fund was to the tune of about 700 million USD. And about 8 cities in India have access to that fund. And the main objective of that fund is to set up some kind of interventions, projects in the cities for the safety of women. So I come from Chennai, which is in the southern part of India. And the Gender and Policy Lab is located within the Greater Chennai Corporation, which is the oldest local body in India. We were set up in 1913. So we have access to this fund. And as a part of that, our main objective is to address two issues. One is with respect to access to public spaces, women's access to public spaces, and safety of women in public spaces. These are our two important mandates that we address. And how are we going about doing it? We're actually a pretty young entity. We became operational in February this year. And there are a number of other departments in the state, which in the city, which are working. The police is working on this. The social welfare department is working on this. And so also the transportation department is working on this. So what we do is, while we are located within the urban local body, we also engage with other departments. And what we are currently trying to do is understand what is the situation. So we will be shortly undertaking a citywide perception study, at least covering 3,000 women and girls in the study, where we'll be asking them what is their perception of safety and access to public spaces. So we get an understanding and what's the baseline on this? What is it that they perceive to be unsafe? And based on that, we will be formulating some interventions. But as of now, immediately, we are also looking at public spaces. We're looking at parks, we are looking at playgrounds, we are looking at underpasses, foot over bridges. We are saying, what is women's access to these spaces? Are women using these? Do they feel safe using this? So we're trying to see what are the challenges, what are the barriers. Some barriers might be social, some might be structural barriers, and some might be very safety-related barriers. We're trying to understand that and see how we can address that. And also be working with, officials within the system, because we are trying to help them, build some awareness, do some trainings, get them to understand how it is to be sensitive to the needs of women. And we do these training programs and see whether we can change mindsets. And we are also putting our recommendations into all kinds of, tenders. Then there is some tender that's going out for the construction of a toilet, like recently for the bus shelters. We gave our inputs in terms of how to make a bus shelter that is convenient, access, and easy to access and safe for women. So these are things that we put into the tendering documents so that when a contractor is building it, it automatically goes in. So that's the plan to, what we've been doing so far. And a lot of our work involves within the urban local body, engaging with different departments and making our presence felt and trying to give our inputs wherever it's required, and where it's not required, we do try to make our way in there and make ourselves heard.
Thank you very much, Mira. Let's now move from India to Paris. So Marion, could you please share with us some concrete cases in Paris where planning and design practices have directly or indirectly created some situation of gender exclusion? And how maybe have you addressed this problem?
Hi, so I'm very happy to be in this women panel. So like many cities, we have some very, repetitive situations. For example, spaces that are systematically avoided by women. And so, for example, we have some little bridges over the ring road, and like we discovered that almost no woman passes by because it feels dangerous. And then we have some spaces that have been nicely planned recently, very large spaces, where we have this phenomenon of all the space being taken by like mostly, for example, skateboarders, which in general in Paris are mostly male. And so there is this phenomenon of like the schoolyard, that the fact of having a male playing soccer, and they take like 90% of the space in the schoolyard, but you can find this phenomenon again and again in like big squares in Paris. So starting by that, we tried to plan differently. And of course, it's hard because, as you know, you cannot plan all the uses, and it's not the idea of architecture and urban planning. But knowing that, we try to first to really include women during the planning process, which means sometimes we do some like walks with women, and we ask them like what types of uses they would like to do there, and what feeling they would have in a different type of space. And so we achieve like doing different areas in a public space where they feel better. And for example, in the schoolyards, we now have a big program called Oasis, where we actually transform schoolyards into more like gardens. And we are very attentive to those topics. And we try to do like some spaces that are more dedicated to sport, where we know there might be soccer, for example, and some spaces that are dedicated to other uses, and to have a more equitable. But of course, it's very, yeah, I mean, it's very hard, and it's a lot of, because we also want some little girls to play soccer, but in fact, in the schoolyards, they don't, you know, so. And the other thing is that in France, what is curious is that in the architectural schools, we actually have way more women than men, but they don't launch their own architecture firms, and men architects launch their firms. So now we are very strict about that in our competitions. When we do public competitions for like new buildings or new parks or anything, we are very strict about having women teams all the time, so that it also encourages women to launch their firms, and also it encourages, for example, real estate developers to team up with women architects. And so we think it can be a virtuous circle. And we also encourage everybody, when there are like juries panels, if there are teams with only male, that we had that a lot 5 years ago, maybe. We always say something, and in general, when it happens once, they don't do the same the other time, because they don't like being criticized by the city of Paris. So.
Thank you very much, Marion. I would like to ask quite the similar question, the same question to Emma, because I can imagine the soccer, the playground is maybe a different context in Kenya. So maybe do you have some concrete example in Kenya where space has been designed, planned in a way that have created this gender exclusion?
Yeah, I mean, Marion, thank you so much. I just didn't realize how the city, of course, is made up of these small components, and it starts at the playground. And what you've just said has been, because in my other life, I'm also part of a school, and it's just fascinating what you're saying, that even that domination of a playground, it starts at that little minuscule level in a city and then just grows. So yes, in terms of examples, I have many in Kenya, and you know, they say a city that's safe for women and children is safe for everybody. That is safe, not only safe in terms of crime, but safe to, you know, walk around. So I have a picture, because they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I'll just share my screen. Huh? And I don't know whether you can see that, but we have all these roads, and you know, there's a lot of road networks being done around ring roads around Nairobi, and very little thought around how children and women who take their children to school will cross these roads. And you've got, you know, even the footpaths, which sometimes are still not used, the footbridges and the like, but that are still not used sometimes, but in this case have not even been designed for, where schools, where we know that there's a school across a certain freeway that's going through a neighborhood that previously existed almost as one unit, and then has a big freeway passing through it. And the planners have not thought about how the children will go to school, and who takes the children to school most of the time. It's their mummies. And so this picture just really shows that. And another little video clip, it's a bit of a grainy one, but I'll also show you that, that just also speaks. We have this new expressway as well, a lot of road networks and the like being put up in the city, and we have what we call the expressway, that's which the overhead, you know, overpass. But I will share with you if I just give me a moment to open it, a video that then, shows you how children are being expected to interact with the city. So give me a second to just share that. Sorry, I've lost that. But it just shows a video of children trying to cross this highway, and the number of cars coming down at them, and nobody thought that there's a school right there. Of course, the children are going to want to cross, use public means and a public bus system to go home. And my little, I think that if women were involved, and there were women engineers involved, and women planners involved in some of these, projects, especially the massive infrastructure projects, I think the city would look very different, and would be an inclusive city that then, takes care of the most vulnerable, being the children, women, and people living with disability. So those are just two cases in Kenya of two roads. One we call the Outer Ring Road, and this new expressway that's an elevated road, that it's an elevated road intersection, but almost an 8-lane road through some parts of a city that sort of interacted from one side to the other. And now children are being forced to cross, 8 lanes of traffic. And you just wonder, okay, what were the professionals thinking? And those are two bad examples, but I think there's opportunity, of course, to rethink this. And there've been wonderful initiatives. One here because of the UN Habitat, which is, of course, headquartered in Nairobi, and it's called Her City, which is a toolkit that, is for more gender inclusive cities, and how to work through that, and how to have women, girls be part of that design process. And this has to be brought to our leadership, because it's all well and good if we have all these wonderful toolkits. But again, back to the question that I was talking about earlier on, the leaders must embrace these toolkits. The leaders must be put in front of them, so that we are designing better cities for everybody. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Just now, Mira, because you were explaining how you try to centralize the discussion and to try to push all of the different directorates and institutions of the city to include this type of good practices. Can you explain how you work with all of these different stakeholder directorates to ensure these gender responsive measures are included more broadly within the city policies?
Okay. We have for example, we have a department that looks at construction of bus shelters. So we actually went around visiting bus shelters, and we wanted to find out, and we spoke to people who were using the bus shelters, and we asked them, what is the problem with this? So, and we also looked at it, and we found in some of the places there's no lighting at all. The bus shelters were relying on street lighting for lighting. So if there is no street lighting there, or if there is some tree overgrowth and there's no lighting, then there's no lighting at all. So this is something that we have recommended, that you have lighting in the bus shelters. That's an example. And for example, parks. Now recently they're going to construct a few more new parks. So the parks department, before it goes out with design and the tenders, they go out for public bid. So what we're going to do, we had a stakeholder consultation in a park. We invited civil society, we invited some planners, and we started talking to them about parks. Park usage, particularly by women, varies depending on which is the neighborhood that's there. And there are serious safety concerns in some neighborhoods, because there are people who would come in, men who are, alcohol abusers, drug abusers, who come and smash the lights. And then they come in and it gets dark and the women don't want to use it. So those are there. While some neighborhoods, there's very good usage of parks. And there are some parks which are specially designated for persons with disability, children with disabilities. These are called the sensory parks, which are very well used. So we looked at some of the good examples, bad examples, and we say, how can we include this? And I think, like Marianne was mentioning about playgrounds, this is something that we seriously want to engage with. We want to get girls to start using playgrounds. In fact, we are working with the schools department. The urban local body runs about 200 plus schools in the city, and they are going to form what is called the gender clubs. So this is the mayor's announcement. Our mayor is a very dynamic young woman, and she wants to have like clubs in the schools where they can discuss issues relating to gender, gender discrimination, and how can boys and girls work together on this. So here's something that we want to introduce: the concept of sports, girls playing sports, and also get them to understand girls and boys can do different things, because this is for grades 6, 7, and 8, which are like fairly young. So you haven't formed the stereotypes yet. So this is there. We are also working with a women's helpline that's run by the state. So we are trying to help them. They have the standard operating procedures. So they have invited us and asked us to look into their standard operating procedures and see how we can add value to it. That the city runs a lot of homeless shelters. So again, we are looking at the SOPs of that. We're trying to see what can go into it for women's shelters, shelters for persons with disabilities, and try to make it much more easier for people to be rescued and stay and then rehabilitated back in. So there is a SOP, but we are trying to make it, because there are a lot of guidelines, we realize, and we try to get all of them together in one place, because people, for example, the disabilities department knows what are the guidelines for disability, but then that's something that should come into also our city shelter SOP, because there's also shelters run for persons with disabilities. So, and then we're working with the Metropolitan Transport Corporation. In fact, they have installed what is called panic buttons inside buses, because harassment of women takes place inside buses. When there's a crowd, that's the best place for, for men who want to harass women. That's the space that they use. So these are panic buttons. And there's an internal control center where the message would go and, which would go to the police. That's a system they have established. They invited us to, before it went on, where they were doing the pilot, they asked us whether this is okay, how they could make it better. And this is something we'll be working with them in terms of understanding the routing where the maximum panic button hits happen and what can be done with respect to safety around that. So these are because the urban local body we work with has got so many departments, and also there are other government departments that we engage with. And many of these government departments are also got funding for women's safety. So we're trying to see how we can, engage with them also to add value to that. The police, of course, is a very important stakeholder. We work with them, and we are engaged with them. There is a deputy commissioner in charge of crimes against women and children. We've had conversations with her. In fact, we want some of these people to become part of an advisory group for our work so that they can tell us what can be done. So we're trying to do most of this by collaboration, consensus, so that everyone gets, pulled into this whole thing. It becomes everyone's concern, access and safety.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mira. Marion, you were mentioning example how the city has tried to mainstream this type of inclusive, gender inclusive design. Can you, because we know, for example, that some stakeholders see gender as a bonus, but they don't mainstream that. What tactic, what methodology you have used to try to make this not just one or two great experimentation, but really becomes a new norm in Paris?
I think it's a global change in the way of doing urban planning. Like maybe it's a caricature, but for me it's much associated, like, the old male architect like drawing his plan and saying, okay, it will look like this. And now we try to do a process that is more like incremental, that evolves a lot, which asks also less ego from like the architect, the urban planner. And so that's a general thing. And I'm happy to observe also that in, for example, younger generation of also male architects are also very more open to those processes. So it's both a question of gender and of generation, I think. And so we try to really change the way we do our urban processes so that there is not this drawing at the beginning that has then to be implemented, but so that we will choose architects more about a process. Like we will ask them, okay, how do you imagine doing this urban project? Like not how will be the final drawing, but what is your method? And we choose on that. And I think it's a lot about also how we choose as a public authorities, like how do we organize competitions? How do we interact with all those professionals? And so as Emma was saying, I think that if the city is planned for like children, for women, also for disabled people, I mean, at the end, your city is planned for everybody. And so, of course, if your team is more diverse, I mean, the team inside the public authority and inside the architects, if this team is diverse, then the space will work. I'm convinced of that. It's not only women, it's really a global diversity inside the teams. And of course, there is also a race issue because at least in France, urban planning is a very like a white ecosystem. And so, yeah, I think it's a general thing. And if you have a mixed team, you will think about different uses, different situations. And so, yes, we try to do that, which of course asks for more association of the inhabitants. Then that's the key. And it's also by having like diverse teams of architects that you have like a diverse types of population who feel welcome to give their opinion about projects.
It's very interesting because it's also about not just empowering women, it's also about how women have transformed the practices and they bring something to the urban planning and design community by proposing a new and different way of doing. That's very, very interesting. Now I would like to maybe ask two final questions to all of you, maybe shorter answers so we can go through the Q&A because I see we have already direct question from the audience. So my first question is really, what would be your advice for a young urban planner, designer who wants to really accelerate these inclusive, gender inclusive practices? Where should they start?
Okay, I can start by what Emma was saying at the beginning, because first, also take the power positions. I mean, a lot of things are important, but first, if there are professional opportunities and that you are a young woman, you should go there and also work on your fears, work on like not daring to ask for promotion, yes. So just go, and then you will also share your knowledge. You will help other women. So that's very important.
Emma, Mira, do you want to add something on this?
Just to echo it, if you want to see the change in the world, it starts with you. And to change, you cannot sit in the corner. You have to be on the table. They say if you're not at the table, you're the lunch or something like that. You know, if you're not seated at the table, you're on the menu. So women must take up leadership, despite all us generally, whether predisposed culturally or otherwise, we tend to shy away from these leadership positions. I mean, just Marion gave a very interesting statistic of that in the schools of architecture, they have 50%, but how that translates into practice, how it translates into leadership is a different story. So I encourage every woman that if you're going to change for every other woman who comes after you, you must take up leadership positions and positions of influence. And trust me, the men are just as willing to have women and diversity on the table. I have found that majority of people are really good at heart, and whether male or female. Yes, there's unconscious bias, but for the most part, who doesn't want a city that works, you know, for the most part, yeah. So encouraging that young person, take on the leadership.
Thank you. Maybe Mira?
Yes, I would echo what Marion and Emma was saying about women taking up leadership position. And it's also good if planners look at some of the data that's available. For example, there's a study which was done which found in the city of Chennai, 37% women walked as compared to 22% men. So what you need is pedestrian walkways. You don't need big roads for vehicles to go. And when women walk, you have to make the walkway safe. You need to have space so that, because women also walk with children, because Emma was mentioning that there has to be a space for women to walk in a way where it's convenient for them. And also in terms of how's the planning done in terms of location of spaces, because women also do chaining of strips. They don't do, if you look at transport, how women move in a city, often they would do 20 different things once they leave the house. So the transportation and the location of places, our neighborhood needs to have, the spatial layout of a neighborhood needs to take all of that into account to make it much more gender inclusive.
That's very interesting also, because I think the example you provide also show how this fight for more gender inclusive also come together with more sustainability. So all the different aspects come together. And I think that's very important. And we have a team at C40 work on empowering new woman in the climate field with, it's called Women for Climate. So I think it's like how this battle come together and progress together. I think it's very interesting. Last, final, very quick question for the three of you. It's why urban planning and design is so important for gender discrimination. Why is this topic especially?
I think.
Go ahead, please, Emma.
Yeah. I will quote a white man, but and we were just talking about diversity. But Winston Churchill said that we shape our buildings and our buildings shape us. And I like to just say the same thing, like, we shape our cities and our cities shape us. We all know that how we interact with the city does influence our behavior, whether we're male or female, in the same way, just the whole thing about, prevention of crime by environmental design. So how a city is planned has a big impact on how we behave, both male and female, and influences certainly our behavior and our experience of life. So very important city planning, from the scale of a little playground, as has been illustrated so well, a building, and those are the units that form a city, and that does have an impact on our behavior.
Thank you. Marion, Mira?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think cities are full of symbols. So every time we design a space or a building, we also give some meaning to, like, we show what is important. We give some streets the name of people, and so each of those choices is very important for anyone walking in a street. Like as a child, you walk in a street, you will see some monuments, you will see some street names. All that is the city and gives you an idea of, okay, who is important, what matters, etc. And that's why it's so important the way we design cities for gender and for everyone feeling welcome in society, basically.
I agree with the other panelists. And when you look at a city, when you look at a country like India, one of the biggest challenges that women have in terms of moving ahead is family. The entire patriarchal thought constrains a woman's mobility, and mobility is very important. You need to move out of your homes to access all the opportunities that the city holds for you. So, and for you to move out of your house, the city has to be enabling for you to take advantages of what lies outside your home. So something as simple as having good street lighting is something that would enable a woman's safety. And in fact, there was an interesting study done in Delhi with a sample size of 4,000, where they asked men and girls and boys about where would you go to college. And most of the girls said that they would prefer to go to a college which is not very good, so long as it is easily accessible to them. While the boys said, they would prefer to go to a better college. So if you look at that, discrimination and mobility is reinforced by the way the city is designed. If your families think something is unsafe, they are not going to let you out, and then you are fighting a battle within home. And then when you go out, again, you're fighting with a planning system that hasn't taken into account women's specific requirements. But I'm happy to say that there's a lot of dialogue and discussion that's going on. And that is extremely refreshing to see. In fact, we had a campaign where we had it was a night cycling campaign. We had women cycling in, women and men, from up to a point in the city, a center of the city. It was a night cycling. So it started at 7:30 and up to 9 in the night. So just make yourself visible in the city. So it becomes normal for women to be out in the city, and that the city doesn't become a man's space, and woman is out, it will be safe, and families will also not discriminate against women going out and accessing whatever opportunity a city might hold for them.
Thank you. Before reading some of the questions that has been put in the Q&A box, I really advise everyone to look at the chat, because there was a lot of additional examples from Morocco, from Buenos Aires, that also are very interesting. And I would like to read one of the quotes that Maria Golda Hilario shared with us, because you were quoting Churchill, but I think quoting J. Jacobs, probably the most interesting urban planner, and I think her sentence is amazing. She said, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. I think it's very, very inspiring. Few more direct questions for you. There was a question from Manuela, but I think we already mentioned quite a lot this topic. So I will go directly to the one from Patricia, who say numbers are shocking. Totally agree. In addition to break the glass ceiling, I think it is essential to close the knowledge and the data gaps. We need to collaborate with men, but do they know or understand how it feels to live in a city which is not designed for you? How do we close this knowledge gap globally? How do we share all of this information we know about this exclusion, gender exclusion in cities and urban design especially?
I think it's a matter of priorities. Like 5-10 years ago, like climate was not an issue in like architecture competition, from what I observed, and it was just not a criteria, And so it's as you said in the beginning, Hélène, being not the extra point, but saying, okay, it is the heart also of urban design. And so this is a long-term work, because it means like repeating every day, saying it's important. At the beginning, people think, oh, okay, it's just an original idea, but then bit by bit, it becomes mainstream. So I think, yeah, we have to insist to have allies among men, and to show that it's important. So we have to make it an essential criteria when we do public markets or anything. But in all our processes, we have to make it a criteria, and I think it will just become mainstream at the end.
Ira, maybe because I know you are closely monitoring, evaluating this type of number as well. Maybe you want to add also something.
Yes, I think I agree with Maria. And what generally happens is, when we are talking about gender inclusive, often it becomes very women specific, because we did get some feedback from some women who said that we want women only parks, we want only women specific timings. But that's something that we are looking at a little carefully, because the idea is not to keep women and men separate. Idea is that it should be of use to both the genders, and it should be easier for everyone to use. The idea is mainstreaming, not keeping it separate. And I think what's happening is the city of Chennai is a highly urbanized city. In fact, the state of Tamil Nadu in southern India, which is the for which Chennai is the capital, is an urbanized city. It's an urbanized state. And when you look at urban issues are slightly different from rural issues in terms of the needs for women. And urban planning is taking that into account. There was a question I saw on the sensory park. The sensory park is a place, it was on the chat box. I don't know, should I answer that? Or it's a space which has been used for persons with disability, women, persons also with mental health challenges. It has got different play equipment. It is a very nicely used space, which has got sandboxes, which has got a merry-go-round where a wheelchair can go on, and swings and other equipment that children with disability can use. The whole idea is also mainstreaming disability. And parks of this kind of these kind of spaces, they also integrate people from different class categories and different disability status, and it helps people to know each other. I think it's good not to have separate timings and separate parks. It's to be everything together.
Thank you. I would like to ask the question of Hamad Khan, because I think it's an interesting one. You say, what is missing in urban planning and design while led by a man? What will woman leadership bring a major shift? What will woman designer do differently?
Can I attempt that? Yeah, I think whether it's culturally or whether it's genetically, I don't know. This could be dangerous territory I'm wading into. But we have inclinations, whether we're more emotionally inclined and maybe more sensitive to the softer issues of life, maybe more nurturing sometimes, and just by nature, I think nature and nurture, both of those. So I think we need both. We don't need only women in as an urban designers and planners. We need both women, and I think that's been brought out very, very clearly. We need women and men because they're different perspectives, and we need persons with disabilities. We need ethnic and racial diversity because all these facets of the population experience the city differently, and you cannot put yourself in those shoes even if you tried to. I mean, even when the Her City toolkit was being employed in a certain area of Nairobi, and I think some gentlemen had to go out with the girls who were, mapping and talking to people, and they experienced the city through the eyes of the girls. They were shocked, but they were shocked as third parties looking at how, the girls were being catcalled, or they couldn't pass here and they couldn't pass there. And they were shocked because they'd never realized what it was to be a lady in a city. But that said, the real, how the shoe pinches is understood usually by the person who actually is wearing the shoe. So I think there's an aspect that women will bring to the table as urban designers and urban planners because of how they've experienced life, that will make that city more inclusive, whether it's by how they've experienced or also our nature to be more emotionally more inclined to to the nurturing and caring of children, whether it's by nature or nurture. Again, I know I could be very controversial here, but women do take care of children. They're majority of the caregivers, so they do understand the city through also the eyes of a child. And if you have someone like that on a table designing together with a man who understands it maybe in a different perspective, then you've got a win-win scenario. So what fundamentally are women bringing to the table is their experience of the city, so that the city can work for them as well. And we said if a city works for the most vulnerable, many times that is women and children, then it works for everyone. Thank you.
It's very amazing. And also there is great statistics showing how climate change is impacting first the woman, and the statistics are quite high as well. So again, this idea of their experience, their conscience of the risk and everything is also very important to tackle other very important aspects of the different crises we are facing. I would like maybe to stop the discussion. I see there is plenty of other questions, but maybe stop and pass the microphone to Viola. But really a huge thanks to all of you. It was very an interesting and inspiring discussion, and I think we touched on very different aspects, how we can empower women in the urban planning and design field, how we need to change the design practices to make sure the women and the girls can enjoy city as the boys, and how also we need to train them and to change the practices and how they can influence and impact the way we design our city. So thank you very much. And Viola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hélène, and to the speakers. This has been such an inspiring conversation. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I just want to mention just that we have some more events, UrbanShift events coming up. One is on accelerating the shift to nature positive and climate proof urban futures at the World Urban Forum on Wednesday, 29th of June. We also have another UrbanShift webinar coming up in August on engaging youth in climate action, going beyond youth washing, which is another very important topic. You can check the UrbanShift social channels for how to sign up to these events and to stay updated with what UrbanShift is doing. I also want to mention that the recording of this webinar will be shared on the UrbanShift website, both in French and English. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to email us at urbanshift@shiftcities.org. Once again, I really want to thank you all for listening, and to our panelists and moderator for such a great and inspiring discussion. Have a great rest of the day.